Hey, I think we're on. Welcome back. Man, is it Friday again already? um, yeah, so hope you're doing well. I'm going to continue working on this painting I started last week, and I think I'm going to start working on painting this like character in the background. Got a couple ideas here I want to work on. And while I do that, I think I'll talk about I've talked about like how I started my professional career, I guess, like showing up in LA and maybe a little bit of art school, but I think I want to like kind of go back to like the very beginning. Like I was thinking about this, like I never really at some point in my life decided to become an artist or something. It was something that just was as much as I can remember about myself. That's one of the things that's been there my entire life. Um, it started out, so maybe I should start out where I grew up. I grew up in Wyoming, which is like one of I think the least populated state in the country. And I was born in Casper, Wyoming, which is one of the bigger cities. I think it has around 60,000 people. And um, we didn't live in Casper though. We lived 60 miles away from Casper in a little town called Lynch, Wyoming. It's spelled Linch. It was a rancher's name, who owned the plot of land, and it was an oil field camp. So it was just people that worked in the oil fields, and my dad was one of those guys. He was working oil rigs, and he worked for some roustabout contractors, and eventually for Conoco, which became ConocoPhillips. Anyway, so we lived in a small town that, to give you some context, we didn't have stop signs on our roads. We had gravel roads. We had some paved sidewalks. It was basically a small trailer park. It was about probably 15 to 20 families that lived there. And so maybe, I don't know, 150 people maybe. And we lived in a trailer house there on the property. And so my dad had worked in the oil fields. And then when I was a kid, we had a little grade school. So what we had in town, we had a grade school, a post office, and a bar, and a gas station for the company vehicles, mainly. Get started on this painting here. Just trying to figure out what I want to do with it. So, when I was in kindergarten, there was 6 other students. Some of them grew up there in town, and a couple of them were ranch kids that were busting in every morning. And by the time I was in 6th grade, a lot of people had moved out or transferred different places, and so there was just me and another girl in my 6th grade class in a small town. But growing up, in Wyoming in particular, there was, we had long winters, so it would be like we'd have snow drifts and piled up snow by Halloween a lot of years, and so there was a lot of staying inside, obviously because of the weather, and so I would draw. It was like there wasn't a lot going on really, and it was something I've always liked doing, and just making stuff up and drawing pictures of weird stuff. And what I would do is I would get interest. I would have interest in. I remember I was really into dinosaurs when I was a kid, and I thought, well, maybe I'll be a paleontologist someday. And all right, yeah. And then I wanted to be an Air Force pilot. I drew jet fighter planes, and I built model airplanes and model jet fighters and all this stuff. And so had all these interests and all these things I thought about wanting to do when I got older. But the running theme was that I was always drawing pictures of it and making art about the things I was interested in. um, the other thing is that the teachers I had in grade school noticed this knack that I had for drawing, and they seemed to really like it. And so I got lots of positive attention for being an artist. or being able to draw, and I was drawing wildlife and all kinds of different things, and so I got um, kind of told who I was, like, "Oh, you're good at this," like I'm like, "Oh yeah," and I got a lot of positive feedback from it, so I'm like, "Oh, I think I'll keep doing this." And so that's kind of how I got started as just a young kid. Is like I always had the knack for drawing, and then I didn't get discouraged from it. I didn't get talked out of it or told it was dumb or that it was a problem. It was something that was encouraged by the people around me from an early age. Um, so when I was 12, I moved to a larger town in Wyoming called in Gillette, Wyoming, which is where I ended up graduating high school. And when I left Wyoming, that's where I left from. So when I moved to Gillette, it was in the middle of sixth grade, and there was a weird kind of coincidence here. My teacher in sixth grade in Lynch was Mrs. Anderson, and then my homeroom teacher in sixth grade in Gillette was also Mrs. Anderson. It's a different, obviously a different Mrs. Anderson, but kind of a weird little coincidence. Anyway, so when I moved to Gillette, it was much bigger than anything I had ever experienced. So you have to remember, like, there was like 12 students in my whole school, kindergarten through sixth grade, when I left Lynch, and most of my friends had already moved away. Their parents get transferred to, they take other jobs and then end up leaving. So people came and go, went from Lynch. And I remember I wanted to get out of Lynch in the worst way because I was getting close to, like, you know, 12, 13, and I didn't. I could already see how being stuck in that town would be really miserable. Um, I as I got older and being a teenager, I'm glad we moved out of town. Anyway, so we moved to Gillette, and I was a really shy kid. I hadn't been around people like this before. Like, I went from having, like, just me and another girl in my sixth grade class to now there's like 60 students in one school, and, like, I was shy. I didn't know how to. It was like, you know, I didn't know what to do. I was nervous and scared. I was like, I was like pulling my socks up to my knees. I didn't comb my hair anymore. I was like, I didn't know, like, all these things that everybody's already doing as part of the social, socializing, I guess. I didn't wear the right clothes, especially I didn't have the right, I didn't have the whatever it was, Bugle Boy or some stupid stuff. Like, remember I saw a kid wearing that. I thought it said Bulge Boy because he was fat until I realized I was reading it wrong. Like those that you don't know, it's like a clothing brand. It was popular in the 90s, I guess. All right, I'm gonna raise this up a bit. Like, let's see how that looks. Down right there. Do a little transition into it. So let's see what we're doing here. So I remember I just didn't get along. I was really shy, and I didn't know how to socialize with these people. They were, it was just a different scene for me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And so when we moved there, it was like right around beginning of February, and the first time I started fitting in is like we had this little. It was like it was Valentine's Day. We did something out in the playground for recess or something, and we went outside and we made like little snow sculptures, like Valentine's sculptures or whatever. Like, and I went over by myself. I stayed close to where the teachers were at, and and I made this little, like, I was gonna start making like a deer in the snow, but it turned out like this little bunny rabbit or something. And I remember people thinking it was like somehow the girls in the class got wind of this, and they came over and saw it, and they thought it was really cute, and they were all fawning all over it, and they wanted to put it inside of their little snow sculpture. And so I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it. And I carved it out of, like, got it out of the snow, and I carried it over to where their thing was, and, like, I didn't even care. I didn't care if they stepped on it or anything. It's like, like, finally I got somebody to like some sort of like positive attention, or not necessarily positive attention, but um, validation or acceptance, I guess it was, as a grade schooler. Um, let's see what I want to do. And so that was like how I started fitting in. Is that then people noticed I could draw. I was drawing like these monster trucks going through the mud and crushing on top of cars, and some of the other kids thought that was really cool, and they wanted me to draw, a pair of wheels for them so that they could draw their own car on it, because they didn't. It was like drawing these monster truck wheels in 3 dimensions that seemed to be popular for some reason, and so I just did that stuff because it allowed me to make friends, and so that's how I was able to find a way and navigate inside that environment by this ability that I had. So it was sort of like my way of adapting to the environment, even at an early age. And it was also another reinforcement of this artistic notion, like that, so it's easy to impress people when there isn't a lot of competition around, a lot of things that they're aware of. Like I had no idea what it meant, what the significance of whatever skill level I had was, because I was from a really tiny town in the middle of nowhere, and so I had no real objective way to, compare, or I didn't know what was really out there. But what seemed to happen was that no matter where I went with this, it was something that I was always good at. It was always something that people noticed, and that was a consistent thing. So it was, I guess, building my confidence. It was like I was, kind of wondering what I was going to talk about today, and so I messaged my friend Chet, and he was like, talk about, overcoming self doubt, and I started to think about like where it was that had doubt that I had to overcome, and the one thing that I thought was that, like, I never really thought about that I doubted myself as an artist, because I had all of this reinforcement from everybody around me. It was like almost like, you know, part of my identity was really informed by how people reacted around me, and I mean how I formed my view of myself. And so there, like, I never doubted the art part of it for some reason. Like, um, that, not because like I felt like I was better than anybody else, but it was always reinforced as a positive thing. Even my parents didn't try to talk me out of being an artist. No, nobody discouraged me from it, and in fact, it was quite the opposite. I'd always had encouragement, and so um, so that's part of the environment, I think, that helped me, you know in the background of my mind, I guess, as I went out and tried to make a living with it, that I had that foundation from an early age of, this is who you are, and this is what you do, and I liked it. I mean, I felt that I had taken that on myself, but it was really something that was helped formed in my mind by everybody that I had ever grew up with in the environment. So it wasn't just the people, but so when we moved to Gillette, a lot of the industry there is coal mining, and as well as oil and natural gas production, all that kind of stuff. And so they were very, it was a very wealthy school district, and they had a lot of money to put into the schools. And one of the things that they invested in was the arts programs. And so I had access to all kinds of art classes. When I was in high school, we had both a photography and a computer lab, ceramics classes, like all kinds of really um, good, like liberal arts, and I guess, I don't know if that's not really liberal arts, but the fine arts. They invested in it, in the kids, and so that was like pouring gasoline on the fuel for me, because I not only had this sort of knack for being creative and making art, but I had all of this stuff available to me to do it, through the schools and their investments into their art programs. So again, it was like the environment had, like, what my skill set was selected for in that environment. That, there's it could have went in a number of ways, but it was like almost like it was set up just for me. But not that it was, but it was an advantage that I was able to take. Or I guess a privilege I was able to take advantage of in that sense. And thanks to people who thought that it was important to have good art classes for their for their kids in those schools. They invested a lot of money into their athletic programs as well, and they did a lot of good things for the kids in that community. So anyway, trying to think here. Yeah, so I had lots of art classes. What am I doing here? And access to being creative, and had great art instructors, great teachers in the schools. So it's just like the perfect storm environment for fostering an artist, I think. Growing up in the wilderness in Lynch, basically I played out in the prairies and catching snakes and lizards and frogs and sledding down hills and all kinds of things I got into when I was a kid that I had access to because basically I lived out in the wilderness. Like, we didn't have grocery stores for 60 miles. We had to go to Casper to get that stuff. We didn't have a police department, even, so like if things happen, it's like the police weren't going to show up for a while. No ambulances. We were kind of living like basically like camping. Literally was a camp, the oil field camp. Um, so that was great, I think, for being a little kid, and we didn't have a TV with 3 channels on it or something like that. I grew up outside basically, and I feel like that was a great benefit to me as a kid. Then moving at the right time to a bigger town that had more resources for families and for kids is like that was another sort of really great thing that happened. Where am I going with this? So, anyways, just it's like all these things that happened like at the right time, and I just it happened to benefit the skill that I had of drawing, or in the aptitude for wanting to pursue it. I guess the aptitude came from the encouragement I got from friends in school and teachers and all that stuff. It was like it so that there wasn't really any doubt that that's something that I could pursue if I wanted to. I just had, you know, I guess a foolhardy belief that that's what I could do. I mean, so when I was in high school, I was also pretty good at science and math. We had chemistry classes and like organic chemistry in high school and physics and advanced math classes, and I was really interested in those mainly because they seemed so logical and they made a lot of sense, and it was easy for me. And I remember I was thinking about, well, maybe I could go into chemical engineering or something, and because I like chemistry and the physics, and there was some interest there, and it occurred to me that I don't really know that much about those things, and they're fun, but like, what if I go to the trouble of going to school and do all this stuff and I realize I really don't like doing it? That was a possibility. And so I looked at, like, well, I could pursue being an artist, but like the idea that I grew up with was that, you know, you work for other people, so I had to be able to get a job doing that, and I found that, I could probably get work at animation studios doing stuff. They hired out of these art schools that were sending flyers and stuff to my high school art teacher, and so I started I thought, well, so I found that I could get jobs that would pay good money, and so there were jobs to be had. So I thought that proved it to me enough that I could go pursue that and find work as an artist. And I figured that you know, I could be good enough to do that. Um, so that's kind of how I made that decision. I just like what happened is I was applying to art schools and I got rejected. I applied to some of them when I was a junior in high school and got rejected, and then I applied to one from Columbus College of Art and Design that was basically they'd sent a brochure to my art teacher and it was sitting on his desk, and so I sent in slides and applied, and I ended up getting a scholarship from that school. That it was a $24,000 scholarship, and the tuition was like let's say $10,000 a year, I think. So it paid for almost 2/3 of the tuition, and so that's kind of how I decided where to go to go to school was and Disney and animation studios did hire out of that school. So I knew that my idea of getting a job through one of these programs through one of these schools would was a reasonable thing to think. And so that's kind of how I decided where to go. Is that I went to the place that gave me the best deal, the best scholarship. I can't remember if I got any offers from any other schools. Um, exactly. I don't really remember. But that's where I decided to go. And when I was a senior in high school, my parents got transferred again to Virginia, which just happened to be 300 miles away from Columbus, which was a lot closer than Gillette was to it. So it just kind of even that made more sense. Like, oh, I actually got accepted into a school that's it's not like a daily drive, but it's only a 6-hour drive to visit my parents on holidays and stuff. Um, anyway, so what was this looking? Hmm. Yeah, so that's how I decided where to go to art school. And so I think the kind of the point I was thinking about was that, like, uh, I don't know how I decided to do any of this. It just is both something that, that happened to, that I was like I did all these things, but the environment was kind of dictating a lot of what I had to decide, what the decision to be made was. Um, like growing, and it was just happenstance that I had support from people to pursue these, this endeavor. Like, oops. So having the right encouragement, having being born, it's like everything kind of just aligned. Going back to the idea of just blind luck. You know, so I guess I could say this like the stars aligned or something. You could give any explanation for it, but um, one way or another, it was selected for within me somehow, and I don't know why or how. I mean, I think everybody has that thing about something about that they do or know or that they excel at, like, and they're better than almost anybody they know at it. It could be anything. Um, I think sometimes people go their whole life maybe without discovering what it is because it might be something that that it doesn't occur to them what that thing is. Um, like if I would have been born in a war torn country with all kinds of other really big problems going on, um, this like it wouldn't have necessarily been even discovered. So just the circumstance of being born in the right place at the right time was a huge factor in the whole story, really. So yeah, like just the pure circumstances, you yeah, I could have born anywhere, but I was born, you know, like if you had to choose where you were born, like would you have chosen like the place you were born? Like what I have thought to like, yeah, I think growing up and being born in 1976 in a town that doesn't have its own grocery store is a good idea. Barely has electricity, and like I wouldn't have ever guessed that would have been the ideal situation for me as a kid. But yeah. So I think the environment just happened to have a lot to do with it. And it didn't make me the environment didn't give me the like knack for drawing and recognizing patterns and stuff. And I remember that's what it was when I was a kid. I would recognize the shapes of animals, like the humps on the shoulders of a polar bear or something. Those things really interested me. So like you know, the environment didn't necessarily give that to me, but the ability to do that was an advantage for me as far as like a social advantage. It allowed me to make friends and have something to offer to people that was kind of like like you can do a trick. It's kind of what it was like. It's like I was good at this little trick. I was also when I was a little kid, I was really good at running. I was super fast. I could run. I could jump. But as I got older and moved to bigger towns, there were people who could run and jump and do all those things faster and better than I could. So that wasn't it wasn't my thing anymore. It was like something that a lot of people could do and do it better. So like, I guess my notions of being a 100-yard dash champion, I got dashed when I moved to Gillette. Like I was I remember we had a running test and I was like the 50-yard dash. I was the fastest boy in my my class. There was a girl who was faster than everybody. But I took some pride that after I moved to town, I was still pretty fast compared to all these other kids. And then we had a track meet, and there was like a whole bunch of other schools from the same town, and I was nowhere even close to being the fastest. Like there were kids that looked like giants, when I was in sixth grade. Some of them had already started hitting puberty, and yeah, so that notion went away. I was like, all right, I'm not the fastest kid anymore, or the most athletic. I can't run and jump the fastest, but I could still, you know, I was the best at drawing, and so like going back to like the kind of the people informing you of who you are, like I was good at drawing, and I got recognized for that, and so people, I think, accept. I don't think if you went and asked anybody I went to grade school or high school with, and they found out that I was an artist, I don't think that they would be super surprised by it. So like, I don't know if I like was calling I didn't really have I wasn't calling myself anything, but I was one of the class artists. I knew that. Um, there when I was in high school, there was a few of us that were really good, and we were all pretty good friends. It was like it's like the one of the things that we all had in common, right? Like, yeah, we can all draw pretty good, and there was some really serious talent when I was in high school. Some some really good artists, really creative minds. So that school system was really you know did a good job with creating an environment to foster the creative aspirations of its youth there. Um, so where was I going with that? Sorry, guys, I'm getting lost in the painting here. I'm trying to like figure out what I'm doing here. Let's see. So yeah, the doubt of what I was doing, that was the only thing I didn't doubt, probably. Um, but I don't think it was the nature of me. I think um, it's I wasn't surrounded by people who were also doubting me, so I didn't have a reason to doubt what I wanted. Like the creative side of things. I didn't have a reason to doubt that. And I also I grew up in a religious household in evangelical churches, so I was raised with a notion of believing, and I think just the sort of the construct of the ability to believe without any real evidence of anything allowed me to believe that I was that allowed me not to have doubt in myself. Um, let's see. So I guess maybe you could chalk up some of it to being, that as growing up, the lack of doubt was just a delusion, a beneficial one, maybe that at least, like I had doubts about a lot of other things in my life, about being accepted as, you know, like everybody does. I think we just have these doubts, but like the art thing was the one thing I was confident about, and I felt like I had, you know, enough. I guess there was enough evidence to me to make me believe that. So the one thing I remember when I went to art school before I got there, I realized that like, oh man, so I've been, like a good artist compared to all these yahoos in Wyoming. um, but I don't know like what the real world is like, what the skill level is like nationally. Like, what's that going to be like? So I was expecting to show up to art school and there's just going to be people like blowing my mind. Um, but when I got there, it seemed that um, most of them didn't have that much of a skill. They weren't as skilled as I had thought they were going to be. I was actually surprised that the lack of overall skill for most of the students. And I'm not trying to say that to disparage them. It's just like my judgment of what was um, skill was like can you make something look like it's supposed to look, like really academic way of thinking. Um, a lot of those people became, as I think they both became, and I had a better understanding of creativity and art myself. Uh, the ones that maybe didn't have the best technical skills that in my mind, when I started, became some really fantastic artists because what they they were able to find better ways to express their creativity, and it's not the technical ability necessarily that makes something makes I think somebody a great artist. I think what makes somebody an artist is their ability to express things in ways that that you wouldn't maybe expect, or that are interesting. They have something that is. I think of art as entertainment, I guess, and so when I'm looking at art and people like if you think about art as like people don't like modern art or abstract art or something, and it's like I don't like they don't get it or something, and it's because they have the mentality that like there's something to get, and sometimes it can just be as simple as you like looking at it. That's all you really have to get about art, I think, to understand it is, do you like it? Yeah? Okay, well, that's good. Um, it does you don't have to like it for it to be art, but I think that's what art is going after a lot of times. It's going after um, something that is a marvel within its own self. I I enjoy what I enjoy sometimes about making some artwork is when I get done with it, like I don't even know how I did it. I don't know how I thought of that or where it came from, and I like surprising myself. Like I never know exactly what these are going to turn into when I start, and so part of the excitement is like what's going to happen. What's and so well, when I started out, um, like professionally, I guess I was making really elaborately planned paintings. That's part of the training you get in art school, I guess. Is I'll be focusing on making a detailed drawing. I come up with a sketch and idea, then it'll be a detailed drawing on top of that, and then carefully deciding where everything goes and spending all this time doing that, and then transferring that drawing to a painting surface, then carefully rendering the drawing and rendering the painting. And I was doing acrylic paints and colored pencils. Um, Part of the reason I was doing that was just again the environment that I was in. I was living in a studio apartment, and so the the mess of oil paints were something I wanted to avoid. The smell, the fumes, all that kind of stuff. Plus, they were more expensive for materials. And so the acrylic paints and color pencils were more convenient to use, and it was a technique that I had learned and built upon when I was in school in college. Um, so yeah, I was doing this whole elaborate process, and it was kind of slow and tedious. And I remember getting tired of doing this long process. So there was a couple of things I was tired of, just all the spending an hour blending with a colored pencil in a 3-inch square space and barely accomplishing anything like that. I don't know. That was frustrating to me. So um, I didn't want to do that, and plus I was looking at my sketches and my drawings and looking at my paintings, and then my and then through all this process of redoing and refining it, making it better, I somehow the life of the sketch was lost, like the sort of life of the idea. And so what I decided to do is just to stop doing all these elaborate drawings and basically and come up with a thumbnail sketch plan, and then everything else would just happen on the canvas. And so I was sort of evolving the process to weed out all these things that weren't working for me. I wasn't getting the results that I wanted out of it. So I started figuring out ways to change the way I was working, both to have more satisfaction in the creating of the work, but also it to uh, take up less time. Like, I don't necessarily like spending a lot of time on just one little thing in a piece. Like, s- I'll do it sometimes in some of these paintings, but I like immediate results. I guess like everybody else, huh? But let's see. Hmm. No, sir, I don't like it. Yeah, need a smaller version. So I've over time I've changed and evolved the process that I have to um, basically what I was getting at is the efficiency of the process. Like, so I guess what I aim to do in painting or any area of life is to do the least amount of effort to get the most results. So that's basically what I'm trying to do is become more efficient in what I'm doing. Um, I, I, what I mean by like when I don't want to spend forever on a little area of painting is like I don't want to spend forever on a little area of painting if there's a faster way or a more efficient and effective way to do it. And so the only way to find those methods is to continuously do them differently until you find something that works even better than what you were doing. And it takes just a lot of experimentation. And so when I'm working on these paintings, I'm always working with interesting different color palettes or pigments and trying to figure out like how to use different things. Um, Sometimes what happens is it helps me to solve a problem in another painting. I'll stumble across a certain way of doing something like, oh, if I did that in this other painting, it might solve, whatever the issue is. Let's see. And also the constant changing and evolving of your process, it keeps from becoming a stagnant, step by step approach to making the artwork, which if I guess I like variation in doing things. So if it was like one step, then the next step, and then the next step, and it was that way for 10,000 paintings, it seems like the producing of the work might get dull. And so my I like to make paintings that are fun to make, and they're fun to make when something happens that you start discovering something that you hadn't done before, or you improvise on something and it works, and then it leads you to some other path of discovery in the process. So, like the making of the painting becomes, in and of itself, some unique solving of a puzzle that you're simultaneously creating. And the paintings I like to look at from other people are the paintings that I can see that they were fun to make. Like I can tell that person had fun making that painting. That looks like because what's fun is like the way that like the tactile feeling. It's another thing that my friend Chet was talking about. Is like it's like when you're talking to people about making art and trying to give instructions. Like there's no way you can tell people like what it feels like when you got the paint just the right consistency and it's going on like butter and every mark is falling in its right place. Like it's you can't teach people that. And the only way to have that experience is to really jump into it and start doing it. And sometimes it takes, sometimes you don't get there in every painting. Sometimes you do. It's the act of making the art is the art itself for me. Like I was asked to like is it difficult to sell your artwork? And there's a couple answers to that. One of them was, I want my art to be out in the world with people enjoying it. It doesn't do any good for me to just have it sitting in here in my studio and just, I can enjoy them too, but part of making art is uh, the connection you find with other people. That's how I was making friends when I was a little kid. And so that's the way I approach it. Art is a way of connecting in a positive way. All right, let's see here. Change this up. Hmm. Get a bigger brush there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, guys. I think I was talking about how making art that's looks like it's fun to make. So there's the other trick of this is like sometimes a painting is a battle. It doesn't go the way you want it to, and um, the trick so the trick is to make even those paintings look like you had fun. So even and sort of the way that things look like they're fun is if they look like there was no effort made, like no effort was really taken. It was like it looked like it was effortless somehow. Like if I can pull that off in a painting, I feel like it's a success. Um, it's hard to get that with like most, like every piece. Every painting has its different challenges, but but that's that's hmm, don't know if I like that. The trick of the thing with that though is that that's not something you can like do on purpose. Um, like sometimes when they look effortless, it's because it also feels like you didn't put any effort into it. Like it just happens, and everything's in its right place. All the paints coming together. It's like, and it's like you're in the zone. I guess that's what you call it, or in the flow, or something. But everything just works seamlessly to or works with what you're doing. Like, so everything goes with it goes with you in a sense. Maybe you're going with it. I don't know, but that's that's kind of where I find a lot of the joy in painting is in the making of it, and when you can make it look like it was fun on top of it, it's like even better. I'm not sure what I want to do back here. Let's see. Is that too much? And so um, part of that feeling comes from not trying to or what's the how do I want for this? Like not trying to control it totally, like letting things sort of get out of hand creatively, like risking that you might screw it up. That tends to make it um, like that when you kind of play fast and loose a little bit, it allows for things to happen, and then you can react and change things. That you can kind of navigate and guide things without actually feeling like you're making any of the decisions. And that's fun. And so, like, even when it's coming up with ideas for paintings, it's the same thing. It's like if I sit down and I just try to like, all right, I have this idea, I'm gonna come up with it. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it's just like noodling around on a sketch pad on just kind of like if you're on the phone and just talking with your friend and doodling, and then something comes out of it. Like so often, the ideas come to you like when you're in the middle of just doing something, um, going around sketching people. Just like you start working on stuff, and eventually, it's going to turn into ideas. So you're giving yourself something to bounce around mentally. So a lot of the ideas I have are accidental or incidental. Maybe I don't know if I'm doing this the right way. It looks pretty cool. It's a bit different than my sketch. So like that's the other thing too is like I have these sketches and I might vary from them dramatically just because I allow myself to have some flexibility in um, where I'm going with something. So if I feel like I don't want to be pinned down into something too rigid. Um, it will keep me from recognizing a better idea in the middle of the project and then switching gears. And I like to opt if I recognize while I'm working on something that I have a better solution for the painting that requires like me to do something more drastic. It, I might not do it right away, but eventually I just get real with myself and I know that it's going to change, and because I won't be happy with it, knowing that it could be better, or that you know becomes obvious. It becomes really apparent in my mind that the newer direction or idea is just a way better, more interesting solution or a better idea. So the ideas, I allow ideas to evolve even after I start the painting. Um, so I give myself a wide berth of creative freedom to change my mind, which is something you can do when you're just making paintings for yourself. It's if you're doing commercial work, generally they like to see what they're getting or have a pretty good idea what they're going to get based on whatever your sketch is. Unless you can train them to somehow not get to accept whatever it is that you do. It's one of the caveats of doing commissions too. Is I like people to understand that when I'm doing a commission that um, given my having that creative freedom will end up being in a better painting for them overall too. So that's kind of one of the things that people who commission me have to be able to accept is that you'll get like a sketch, but it may end up being a little bit different than that. Um, Not always though. I think that's like too cool. Let's do some purple in there. Too greenish, maybe. Anyway, like that. Yeah, allow things to evolve, and um, things aren't going to evolve if you don't put some energy into changing them. So, like, the evolution can happen a couple of ways. It can happen by the environment changing you and forcing you to adapt what you're doing. Like, if I all of a sudden didn't have the studio and I had to work in a 6-foot square box, I would probably make different paintings, different sizes, and different things. If paintings was still something I was doing in that situation. Um, some of it is just decided by your own initiative too. So, like, and that's the angle I like to take on the paintings, is that I change up what I do enough to allow for new things to happen, and um, when those new things happen, I can then incorporate that into the process that I'm doing in future paintings too. And so, um, like, evolution generally is kind of the survival of the good enough, in the sense that, like, it only has to be good enough to reproduce, and that's it. It doesn't have to have any special skills beyond that. So, like, being an artist isn't like a evolutionary advantage in this environment. It doesn't, you know, unless you consider that maybe more artists get laid more often, but probably not. Probably not as much as you think. But so, like, you're not gonna necessarily improve or grow anything that you're doing if you don't put energy into it. So if you think that, in terms of the thing that we're fighting in from an evolutionary standpoint, is basically entropy, which is like things decaying and falling apart over time, and transferring energy from one place to another. Um, so the thing that combats against that is putting energy into it. That's pretty nice. So for you to think about developing your skill, or if you're an artist, like, your business part of your business, you have to put energy into it. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to make it work, but it doesn't go into work if you don't. And then the other side of it is that there's just a certain amount of the environment, what the environment is selecting for it. Um, if you live in a small town that doesn't support an art community, it might be harder for you to make a living. Although, or if you don't, and if you don't have, like, so, like, I would say right now, the biggest selective force is people's ability to navigate the online market. Like, it's probably selecting for artists who are good at, not just technically good at making artwork, but artists who are good at um, video editing, making, video and audio stuff, like all the stuff is required to succeed. Computer programmers, probably, they understand how these computer algorithms might work, and so there's a certain selective pressure on what's succeeding now versus even when I was young, when I started out. This is pretty trippy. Well, I think that's about an hour. I've met my quota. It was fun working on this, blabbing away. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Guess I will see you next Friday. If you have any topics of discussion you'd like addressed, keep it to yourself. No, just kidding. You're gonna comment or message me, and maybe I can get to it the next time around. All right. So I will sign off for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Talk to you next week.